I love a good art style. I mean, every game has an art style. Even Focus M games have an art style. A terrible one, but it still technically is one. I mean, you wouldn't hire countless artists to make a unified vision if you weren't wanting your game to look consistent. I consider video games art. I mean, every game someone has to sit down and think, how will this game look? How will the player model contrast against the environment? How will the UI blend or contrast against the elements to be visible but not distracting? How do I make the most realistic graphics possible to earn that IGN 9 out of 10? Now, I am the aspiring artist, but I will study game visuals. It's a mix of me learning the style to replicate and understand the craft, and a mix of it just being cool to study. But what is extremely interesting is when a team throws everything they learned in art school out the window because who cares? What happens when you give up? Throw your hands in the air. Slap a Mario model in a realistic Unreal Engine field. You see, something I find interesting is when a game rejects the idea of a unified art style. The belief that everything has to fit and match. Now, I'm not talking about contrast deliberately. Like, graffiti in a suburban neighborhood is a contrasting art style, but that's environmental storytelling. No. That graffiti would have to be on the whole nother level with different artists. Bombrush Cyberfunk has different artists do unlockable graffiti in the game, and while this is rad, as a huge collaborative art gallery, it's all unified. Every artist followed a theme or style, as well as the environment fitting the grind fiction aesthetic makes their graffiti and buildings belong together. No, if we truly want an example of giving up, we gotta go further. Truly immerse ourselves in the Focus M world. I need devs to accept whatever the artist handed to them with no revisions. I need Shin Tensei 4. Shin Tensei 4 has one of the most interesting art styles I've ever seen in a game, mainly through its lack of one. Its background clearly is trying to be realistic post-apocalyptic Tokyo. However, they mashed this game onto a 3DS, so it blends the low-poly anime models to have this weird, off-putting style. The 3DS was one of the last pieces of hardware to have games' art styles be dictated by the limitations of the hardware. You could count the Switch in that, but there's a clear visual difference between Nintendo's first-party output between the two consoles. But that's not what we're here for. We're here for the demons. In battle, all the sprites on the top of the screen follow a clear visual unity, but on the bottom we get the demon's art. And we've just entered the lottery. You see, the use of sprites allowed Atlus to put as many demons as they wanted. Demons that were done by various different artists. Which means your party screen can have completely contrasting art styles. But the weird thing is, it doesn't matter. You can add anyone to this lineup and no one would notice. In fact, I just proved it. That's not the protagonist of Shin Megami Tensei 4. That's Ringo's sprite from Soul Hackers 2. I literally did a texture edit and it fits right in. The Soul Hackers remake on the 3DS also has these visual design elements, but the world UI and characters are so much more visually in unison. SMT4's design lacks its visual unity because it just mashed a bunch of elements. The whole game is centered around this gang of samurai being out of their element. You can see this through the visual clash with any human elements in the design. Demons will have different eyes and hair shading, making them visually different. It not only shows the clashing elements, but also the uniqueness of each artist's style. When doing some texture edits on my own time, I noticed a lot of the textures to this game having extremely realistic features, much like how the 4th and 5th gen consoles would. It's interesting to see this because 3DS games using textures like this suffered the same limitations as the consoles, due to needing to lower the resolution of those high quality textures. When making texture packs for this era, fans often would scour old resource packs to find the exact match. This is where a lot of the tonal disconnect Unreal Engine packs come from, because realistic textures with stylized art styles doesn't create a visual flow unless having the addition of deliberate lighting. Anime visuals and sprite work of SMT4 are interesting in that regard because it keeps the old jumble look, but it stayed from looking like an Unreal Engine tech demo due to it being on the 3DS. You can see SMT5 being an evolution of this style by being more realistic than Persona, but having the characters models having specific lighting done to make everything actually fit. You can see these elements and models when not having lit up, having flat colors and drawn textures. But those models required Atlus to keep a consistent visual style in comparison to the flexibility of the previously mentioned sprites. Clashing elements from different artists are things crossover fighters have to deal with. However, with the more official ones, there needs to be a visual unity between all the characters no matter what. This is from the fact that every character's action needs to be clearly telegraphed to both players, so a clear visual style is important. You can even see this in crossover one-off characters in fighting games, where a character will be adapted to fit the universe. Then M.U.G.E.N comes around and says fuck it. M.U.G.E.N is community driven, so thus there's no visual cohesion due to the fact there's no communication between artists. You can add whatever character, whatever design. This leads to characters having insane height differences, moves being insane. It truly feels like walking into a community gallery in a way. It truly puts the belief that contrast is the most important element in art to the ultimate test. There's even differences in animation, as some characters will be ripped from games and have gorgeous animations that can't compare to a hobbyist. It feels like a playable form of those reanimated projects. Every match you load could be visually different, just like every cut would be different visually. The clash of amateur and joke characters creates such an interesting concept. It would be like having James Baxter animate a scene, followed by a 5-year-old, which displays such a distinct visual cohesion that it feels like a love letter to art. But alright, those clashing styles are from a wide group of artists having their works placed in the same style. What happens when a single or very small team comes together and decides the lack of style is the style? A lot of games following this were inspired by LSD Dream Simulator, a game with no goal but just to replicate and relive the creator's dreams. I don't need to tell you dreams are weird, you've seen this game. M.U.G.E.N took this concept and moved it to a 2D plane, but the main focus is still the same. Both of these games were very early dreamlike simulators that have a massive influence on so many games today. But before we see what's inspired it, let's lay the foundation because these games are very similar in their attempts visually. The replication of dreams leads to this distinct freedom to be able to do whatever you want. M.U.G.E.N backgrounds will change complexity. Sometimes you'll just get some weird looking guy floating around, and then you'll get a snow world out of the SNES. The fact you're aware of these dreams creates this forgiveness the player grants that allows them to be sucked into these worlds. Visual cohesion be damned. If you witness something that didn't blend into the previous world in any way, you don't care. It's a dream. It's really interesting seeing a medium where fruit being not individually rendered can suck someone out, just for completely different tones and environments to keep someone hooked. Both of these games led the framework for more games. LSD Dream Emulator is most recently known for inspiring Edna's Dream Barbecue, which has the addition of several full animations from different mediums. But the background direction is so strong that everyone feels completely in the world. It's basically the gumball effect. M.U.G.E.N has a ton of fan games, but the one most represents what we are speaking of today is M.U.G.E.N, which basically is a massive community-led project with people contributing their own rooms to make what is essentially a massive group love letter to the original. Because everyone has their own ideas of M.U.G.E.N and what would be cool to explore. Thus, you never know what you're gonna get when you open a door. The freedom of expectation allows an open-mindedness the original games never fully encouraged. M.U.G.E.N feels like a full-on sequel to LSD and M.U.G.E.N in just how the game is experienced rather than any elements in its gameplay or art. Going through the M.U.G.E.N wiki, you can see so many artists all collaborating with different skill levels. It harkens back to one of my favorite elements of the internet. People with various different talents, skills, and experiences all working together just to make something out of sheer passion. And yeah, sometimes those projects are bad, or they suffer from mismanagement and die in a Google Doc exposing someone for some sort of crime. But it's always worth it when something great like M.U.G.E.N comes out. But everyone's heard of these games, so let's go for something a little nicher. Basically the second game I wanted to talk about in this video. Disillusion ST. This game is weird. The story revolves around you being in Naraka to climb a massive tower that enables souls to reach enlightenment. Basically, you go around meeting characters and helping them with their problems. The main star of the show for me are said characters. A lot of these characters occupy different art styles and dimensional space. Some characters have visually flat 2D planes while others are full 3D. The game's memorability comes solely from these designs, which makes sense. Despite this game being niche, it still got recognition inside the Dream emulator communities. I don't want to mention much about the game itself here, because a lot of the game thrives on a blind playthrough where you get immersed and discover things. And you have eyes, you all can see this and how good it looks. Like, go play it! So what did we learn today? I don't know, nothing that is useful because I just wanted to talk about art styles because of my passion for art in games. It's always interesting to study because games have always been in this weird middle ground between tech and film industries. Where film is more about art, tech has always been about pushing itself to the limit of technical achievement. Games have always had the goal of achieving the most realistic graphics possible. And I don't think it was a wrong choice because the game industry evolved so much in 3 decades, it's honestly insane. But now we're at this point where we can look back and see what worked in people's attempts and what didn't. If you watch to the end of the video, you're a lifesaver. This is one of the first videos for me, so if you leave a comment, I actually will see it. Yep.